Something strange is happening to the world's most ordinary objects. Bridges are adjusting themselves while no one is watching, not with dramatic movement or visible mechanisms, but with subtle internal shifts that redistribute stress before cracks ever form. Steel flexes just enough. Internal structures compensate quietly. What once required inspections, closures, and repairs now happens invisibly, moment by moment. Factories are reorganizing their own workflows in the middle of a shift, rerouting tasks, slowing one process, accelerating another, all without a supervisor stepping in or a meeting being called. Materials are responding to pressure, heat, and wear before damage ever appears. Entire systems are acting first, quietly and confidently, and the most surprising part is not that this is happening, it's that daily life keeps getting smoother because of it. Technology is no longer waiting. For the first time in human history, the tools that shape daily life are beginning to sense their surroundings, interpret what's happening, and change their behavior on the fly. Not in controlled lab demos, not as futuristic prototypes sealed off from reality. This is unfolding inside cities, supply chains, homes, hospitals, factories, and workplaces that millions of people rely on every single day. Elevators anticipate load changes before anyone feels a slowdown. Warehouses rebalance themselves mid-operation when demand shifts unexpectedly. Buildings quietly correct internal stress before anyone files a maintenance request or notices something feels off. The shift is subtle, but its consequences are enormous, because it changes who does the work of noticing, adjusting, and preventing problems. If you care about how technology is quietly reshaping work, cities, and everyday life, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's unfolding. For most of history, technology followed a simple and deeply familiar pattern. Tools waited, machines stayed idle, materials remained indifferent to what was happening around them. Nothing moved until a human noticed a problem and stepped in. That expectation shaped how almost everything was designed. Roads assumed congestion would happen and tried to manage it afterward. Buildings assumed wear and tear was inevitable and planned repairs on fixed schedules. Workflows assumed inefficiency and built entire roles around catching mistakes late. Systems were built to react, not to notice. Life adapted to that delay. People learned to live with friction because removing it required constant attention. Meetings existed to surface issues that should have been obvious. Maintenance crews existed because machines couldn't feel themselves wearing out. Control rooms filled with dashboards existed because systems could not coordinate on their own. Entire industries formed around reacting to problems instead of preventing them. The cost wasn't just money, it was time, focus, and energy drained away in small, constant increments that quietly shaped how people worked, moved, and lived. It became normal to expect things to break, stall, or fail before anyone could respond. That pattern is breaking. Today, systems are starting to notice what humans never could. Tiny sensors embedded in materials feel stress at levels invisible to the eye. Machines recognize vibration patterns that signal failure weeks before anything looks wrong. Infrastructure senses shifting loads, changing weather, and real-time usage, instead of relying on averages and historical guesses. Decisions happen locally and immediately, without waiting for instructions to travel up a chain of command or through layers of approval. Small adjustments compound into stability, and stability reshapes expectations about how reliable the world can feel. This changes how the world feels to live in. A factory no longer sounds like constant alarms and rushed corrections. Instead of reacting to breakdowns, machines adjust their pace automatically as demand shifts throughout the day. If one system slows down, others compensate without anyone calling a meeting or rewriting a schedule. Production continues smoothly, hour after hour, shift after shift. The same people are still there, but their attention is no longer consumed by anticipating failure. The workday becomes calmer, more predictable, and more focused on improvement rather than repair. People spend more time refining processes, mentoring others, and thinking creatively, and less time scrambling to save something that should have worked in the first place. Cities begin to feel different too. Traffic flows more evenly, not because drivers suddenly behave better, but because the system adapts in real time. Signals respond to actual movement instead of fixed timers set months ago. Congestion dissolves before it hardens into gridlock. Commutes feel less erratic. Energy usage smooths out as grids balance supply and demand locally instead of reacting to spikes after they happen. Infrastructure doesn't wait to fail before being repaired. It quietly maintains itself, often without anyone realizing that anything was ever at risk in the first place. Materials themselves are no longer passive participants in this story. Some structures stiffen only where stress appears, conserving strength instead of overbuilding everywhere. Some surfaces seal microscopic cracks before water, heat, or vibration can spread damage. Fabrics adjust insulation as environments change, keeping bodies comfortable without apps, settings, or constant adjustments. Over time, these small responses add up to longer lifespans, fewer repairs, lower costs, and environments that feel more forgiving and resilient. Matter begins to feel less like a static backdrop and more like an active participant in daily life. There's a subtle humor in this moment. Humans spent decades building increasingly complex control systems to manage fragile technology, only to discover that once machines and materials could respond on their own, much of that control became unnecessary. The future is not filled with more dashboards, more alerts, or more buttons to press. It's filled with fewer interruptions, fewer emergencies, and fewer moments where everything grinds to a halt, because one small issue went unnoticed. Everyday life begins to feel lighter. Homes quietly manage temperature, air quality, and energy use without constant adjustment. Rooms adapt to how they're actually used rather than how they were designed on paper years earlier. Workspaces reconfigure themselves around real patterns of movement and collaboration instead of rigid schedules. Transportation becomes more reliable, not because systems are perfect, but because they correct small problems before they have a chance to grow into big ones. Clothing responds to environment. Tools stay ready without reminders. Life contains fewer friction points that pull attention away from what matters and more moments that simply flow. Technology doesn't disappear, it steps back. The most advanced systems are the ones that demand the least attention. They operate continuously in the background, supporting daily routines instead of interrupting them. The benefit isn't spectacle or novelty, it's relief. Fewer things to monitor, fewer decisions that drain focus, more time spent on work that feels meaningful, creative, or deeply human. Technology becomes less about control and more about support, less about reacting and more about enabling. This collaboration works because each side plays to its strengths. Machines handle constant sensing, pattern recognition, and rapid adjustment. They never get tired. They never miss subtle changes. Humans provide direction, values, and goals. Instead of issuing step-by-step commands, people set intentions. Instead of micromanaging systems, they shape outcomes and decide what matters most in the first place. Work begins to change as a result. Roles shift away from monitoring screens and reacting to alerts, and toward creativity, judgment, and connection. Value moves from catching errors late to designing better systems from the start. Industries reorganize around cooperation instead of control, and the transition is not subtle. Businesses built on reacting late find themselves competing with systems that simply don't fall behind anymore. Entire layers of effort quietly dissolve as friction disappears and reliability increases. Healthcare starts to feel this shift immediately. Equipment notices anomalies before they become emergencies. Care environments adjust lighting, temperature, and noise to support healing without constant manual control. Clinicians spend less time reacting to alarms and more time focused on people. Logistics feels it as supply chains reroute themselves before delays cascade across continents. Construction feels it as buildings last longer because they respond to stress instead of silently accumulating damage. Education, agriculture, transportation, and energy all follow the same pattern. The common thread across every sector is not speed, it's awareness woven directly into the environment. Looking a little further ahead, this pattern scales outward. Neighborhoods coordinate resources instead of competing for them. Buildings learn from years of use and improve over time rather than slowly wearing down. Infrastructure grows more resilient with age instead of becoming brittle. Adaptation becomes continuous rather than something triggered only by crisis. Systems begin to feel less mechanical and more like living frameworks that evolve alongside the people who use them. As this happens, the questions people ask begin to shift. Attention moves away from control and toward design. Choices about values, priorities, and long-term outcomes start to matter more than switches or settings. The relationship becomes ongoing rather than transactional, with humans living inside systems that actively support their needs instead of constantly demanding attention in return. This is not a story about machines replacing people. It's a story about environments becoming better partners in human life. Less waste, less noise, less friction between intention and outcome. The world remains recognizable, but it becomes more responsive, more supportive, and more aligned with how people actually live and work. Technology fades into the background precisely because it is doing its job so well. The street still looks like a street, the building still looks solid, the machine still hums along, but underneath, something fundamental has shifted. Technology no longer waits to be told what to do. It participates, it adapts, it works quietly in the background, improving the quality of everyday moments one small adjustment at a time. Keep exploring how technology and humanity are building what comes next. Subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. This is Tech Mythos.